Have you ever pondered over how a wealthy young man would willingly choose a life of solitude and austerity in the desert? This is the enigma of Saint Anthony of the Desert, a figure shrouded in mystery and fascination. Born into affluence in the 3rd century, Anthony made the unthinkable choice to shun his inherited wealth, opting instead for a solitary existence in the harsh wilderness. To understand this, we must journey back to the life of Saint Anthony. Saint Anthony was born in 251 in a wealthy family in Egypt. His early years were spent in comfort and prosperity, surrounded by the affluence his parents had built. But this life of luxury was not destined to last. When Anthony was just about 20 years old, a tragic turn of events saw him lose both his parents in quick succession. The loss was profound, and Anthony found himself grappling with the harsh realities of life and death. Suddenly, Anthony was the sole heir to his parents' considerable fortune. But rather than wallow in his wealth, Anthony found himself questioning the purpose of earthly possessions. He began to reflect on the teachings of the Christian faith, which his family had followed devoutly. These teachings spoke of the virtues of poverty, humility, and solitude, virtues that seemed starkly at odds with his affluent upbringing. In the throes of this spiritual struggle, Anthony made a decision that would forever alter the course of his life. He chose to renounce his wealth, his status, and his comfortable life. Inspired by the Gospel of Matthew, which urges followers to sell their possessions and give to the poor, Anthony did just that. He sold off his inheritance, gave the money to the less fortunate, and dedicated his life to pursuing religious devotion. At the tender age of 20, Anthony set off on a journey that would lead him to the harsh, unforgiving desert. The desert, with its vast expanses and endless solitude, represented the perfect setting for Anthony to seek spiritual enlightenment. He hoped that the isolation would bring him closer to God and allow him to develop a deep personal connection with his faith. And so, with a burning desire for spiritual growth, Anthony left his old life behind and ventured into the wilderness. In the harsh deserts of Egypt, St. Anthony began his new life. His home was a small, abandoned fort far removed from any semblance of civilization. His companions were the relentless sun, the shifting sands, and his own thoughts. His days were filled with silence, solitude, and the stark beauty of the desert. Anthony's existence was a stark contrast to the life he had known. Where once he was surrounded by wealth and comfort, he now had nothing but the clothes on his back and a heart full of faith. He survived on meagre rations, often going days without food or water, pushing his body and mind to their absolute limits in pursuit of spiritual purity. But the desert was not just a place of physical hardship. It was also a battlefield of the soul. Anthony was constantly beset by temptations, illusions, and the darkest recesses of his own mind. These were his demons, and he fought them with prayer and meditation. His struggles were not in vain. Anthony found that each victory over temptation, each moment of resistance brought him closer to God. His spiritual growth was hard-won, the product of countless hours of prayer, contemplation, and the sheer force of his will. Yet despite the harshness of his life, Anthony was not a man of sorrow. On the contrary, he found great joy in his solitude. He saw the world with new eyes, attuned to the subtle rhythms of the desert, the whispering winds, the shifting sands, the scorching sun. He found beauty in simplicity, peace in silence, and wisdom in the natural world. His life in the desert was not a punishment, but a choice to seek God, to test his faith, to purify his soul. He chose the path less travelled, the path of solitude and hardship, and he walked it with unwavering conviction. Through his struggles and unwavering faith, St. Anthony became a beacon of spiritual wisdom. His life in the desert stands as a testament to the power of faith, the strength of the human spirit, and the transformative power of solitude. Despite his solitude, St. Anthony's influence extended far and wide. His life, though hidden away in the barren stretches of the desert, became a beacon of inspiration for many who sought a deeper connection with God. St. Anthony was a pioneer, carving out a path that countless others would follow. He was the first to adopt the life of a hermit, but he was not the last. His choice to abandon worldly possessions and dedicate his life to prayer and contemplation laid the groundwork for Christian monasticism, a movement that would sweep across continents and centuries. But how does a man in isolation touch the lives of so many? The answer lies in the letters he wrote. These letters, full of wisdom and spiritual guidance, were his lifeline to the outside world, his way of sharing the profound insights he gained in his solitude. They were read by others, passed down, and cherished as spiritual treasures. But that's not all. St. Anthony's life story became the subject of a book written by none other than St. Athanasius, the Bishop of Alexandria. This book, The Life of Anthony, was not just a biography, but a spiritual guide, showcasing the virtues of humility, self-denial, and devotion to God. It became a bestseller in its time and remains an important text in Christian literature. St. Anthony's influence didn't stop at his letters or his biography. His teachings, his way of life, became a model for other monks. His dedication to prayer, his perseverance in the face of temptation, his ability to find joy in solitude, these became the pillars of Christian monasticism. His legacy is not just in the words he wrote or the life he lived, but in the countless lives he touched. His influence can be seen in the monasteries that dot the landscapes of Europe and the Middle East, in the monks who walk in his footsteps, and in the countless believers who find inspiration in his story. His life lived in solitude, echoed through the ages, shaping the course of Christian monasticism. St. Anthony of the Desert lived for almost a century, but his legacy lives on. Born in the mid-3rd century, Anthony's journey from wealthy heir to humble hermit set the foundation for Christian monasticism. Through his teachings, he pioneered a life of solitude and spiritual contemplation that continues to inspire Christians today. His profound influence on Christian thought and practice is testament to his enduring impact. St. Anthony, a man who sought solitude, left a lasting mark on Christian history, demonstrating how one person's journey can influence generations to come.